I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa 7 years ago. Anorexia turned me into a different person. My head was filled with powerful voices that completely drowned out my own. Old journal entries revealed the twisted and warped mind of my younger self. My words cut me like a knife.
Everything started in 8th grade. You were passing out in track, passing out at cross country, just super anxious, just didn't seem like a very happy kid at the time. It was maybe like a Friday or Saturday night. You had been babysitting at your cousin's house. You came home, had what looked like to me, and I'm a nurse, a seizure of some sort or something, and we had to call 911. So then we went in an ambulance down to main campus.
I think we were on our third day, and the doctor came in and said, "Hey, you know what? I think this is an eating disorder." That shocked your mother and I, mostly because we didn't understand what that meant.
And of course, your father and I were in shock and really didn't believe them, but they were pretty convinced that that was the cause of all of this.
I gave in to the voices because it was the only way to quiet them. But at the time, I couldn't recognize the anorexic voice as not my own. Once the anorexia was found out, the voice became even more intense. It could feel its control slipping away and would stop at nothing to get it back. At the time, myself and my anorexia were indistinguishable from one another. And so as I was forced into treatment, I felt like I was losing control. As my anorexia clung to me, I clung to it.
The Emily program is definitely a family-based model where you're in the counseling with your child.
Once we visited the Emily program and got a better understanding of what their approach was, it kept the family intact, kept Celia in Cleveland. It never became an option to do anything other than, that approach.
Sure. I mean, FBT is almost certainly the treatment that has the highest success rate of any specific eating disorder treatment. Eating disorders are difficult to treat. FBT believes a therapist's role is to work with the family to be as effective as possible in refeeding and behavior modification. But that the family who have raised the child and know the child and love the child and have relationships far, far beyond what a therapist could have an ability to take control of the feeding and behavioral change in ways that no one else can.
Just continued to struggle with it in silence. And so it was very hard to know where you were and how bad it was. You thought you were fat when, my God, you were like 90 pounds. I mean, in hindsight, good Lord, I don't even know what the hell we were thinking. We lived with you every day, so we didn't see it, but I'm sure other people noticed it. You couldn't not. I look at pictures now, I'm like, oh my Lord, she's like skin and bones. How could I not have seen it? It was so obvious. But we just were not paying attention to it.
Sometimes somebody has a level of symptoms that's rather severe and frequent. And I say that my level of care outpatient is like having a spray bottle for a forest fire, that it's not enough support. But it's very disruptive for an individual to go to a higher level of care.
So it was a very, very hard time, and you weren't making any progress. Weight would go up a little bit, nothing major. It was not, what we were doing was not working. So at the end of freshman year, during a session, Joanna, who was the counselor, was like, I think, you just have to come to intensive outpatient. It's just, there's really no other way to do this.
The intensive outpatient program terrified me. Its promise of weight gain through whatever means necessary petrified me. This fear that I now recognize as irrational was so tangible back then, it consumed me. Each time I looked in the mirror, I hated what I saw. Despite being underweight, I judged my reflection as fat. I believed these delusions. I believed that with each bite of food, I added a pound of fat to my skeleton. Every bite made me fat, made me disgusting. These words constantly echoed in my head. Eating meant I had lost control, that I had failed. Eating brought with it such immense shame and guilt that it was unbearable. Intensive outpatient forced me to confront these feelings by forcing me to eat. My anorexia was desperate to retain its control. I was wrapped in delusions, fear, and anxiety. Looking back, I don't recognize myself.
And I know you didn't want to do it. You cried profusely about having to do it. But, I think you knew you needed to do it, but you didn't want to do it. And so intensive outpatient was 8 to 10 weeks, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. I dropped you off. I would have to come back and forth because I attended some appointments. Your father attended some appointments. But life just stopped. I mean, that summer life stopped.
Frankly, I like to say that FBT is really one of the only therapies truly based on love, because it really asks a family, it asks the parents to use their love for the child, it asks the child to use their love for the parents, and to develop a bond of trust, as painful as that's going to be, because we all know that FBT really can be agonizing, and you can see behavior bursts, and it makes everybody stressed, and it's hard, but because it's a family, they can do it.
Plenty of tears, plenty of fights, lots of struggle, lots of pushback in the beginning. And it was hard. It was hard for everybody, hard for Mom.
It was tense. There was yelling. If I yelled, then I felt terrible because it really wasn't your fault. Dinners were always, a major struggle. It was never easy. And dinners would take 2 hours. And there would be crying and carrying on. And it was stressful for all of us.
Dr. Hill has this exercise where she has individuals write a sentence and then switch the pen to their non-dominant hand and write a sentence. And that struggle, the messiness of that and the lacking confidence while you try to do that, she talks about that's how it feels for somebody with an eating disorder to eat. That individuals can be extremely confident and competent in multiple areas of their lives. Oftentimes individuals in school are getting 4.0 GPAs as they're going through this. And yet the simple act of nutrition and nourishing ourselves can bring forth such extreme anxiety, and that it is not somebody trying to be willful or resistant, but this individual is extremely afraid, and to learn how to help our loved ones. It's not something we just know, but to know how to support an individual in recovery can really make a big difference. The difficulty with anorexia nervosa in particular is that food restriction can feel really good, and it can be tough to find that motivation to recover.
If I'm trying to help someone who has depression, they want me to help them. They're engaged in getting that help. They don't want to be depressed. If you're working with someone who has an eating disorder, that eating disorder is a different part of their identity, and you're asking them to give up something that they quite possibly do not want to give up. And to your point, that will create a lot more combativeness, that will create a lot more stress and tension.
It's not that it was a choice to have this. This is a disease, but it's looked at in society as a choice. So then you feel that you've somehow failed as a parent because your child is going through this excruciatingly horrible thing.
Walter Kay out at UC San Diego has found that the brain receptor and activity in anorexia nervosa is more disrupted than in schizophrenia. So we know that there are very serious issues going on. We know that there is a high mortality rate with this disorder. We know that there are medical complications, and yet we sometimes glorify eating disorders or think it's just a simple fix, just eat or just stop binge eating. And if it were that simple, people would have done it long ago.
I've always thought that we were lucky because you always maintained a level of self-awareness that protected you. Thought you looked at it as like, yeah, this is a problem. And I've got voices inside my head telling me I'm healthy when I'm 25 pounds underweight. And I've got my own lying eyes telling me, no, this is not right. And people, presumably you love and respect, saying, Celia, this is not right. There's a problem. Let's fix this.
It took years for the voices to subside. IOP was not the end, but just the beginning. For years, anorexia dominated not just my life, but the life of my family. When the battle inside my head boiled over into fights at the dinner table, despite my resentment, my parents forced me to do the one thing I could not do: eat. And thank God they did.
It can be challenging. The length of recovery may be longer than some other mental health disorders. And it can be extremely rewarding to really help an individual tap into their strength and genuine control. And eating disorder is about a false sense of control, but it's a real thrill when somebody heals from an eating disorder.
One of the things I often would say to the parents and parent group is this feels like you and your family are coming apart at the seams now. But when your child is in their 20s, you're going to be closer to them than any of your friends are with their kids. You will have gone through something together that will bind you. It is one of the long-term gifts of FBT.
Yeah, I would say I look at life totally differently after all of this. For us, like, no challenge will be as hard as this was. And I think we are through it in some sense. I think you're on a great path. I think that things have, you've gotten through the hardest part and you understand it, and you're able to articulate if you are having problems. And we as a family probably are more open than most families. There is not a lot that I don't know about either of my kids because we talk about everything basically. And that's been a blessing. So this whole thing has taught us that we have each other to depend on no matter what happens.
Overall, it's an experience I wouldn't wish on any family. That said, I think we were lucky. We were lucky with who you are and were in terms of, I go back to the self-awareness point. We're gonna get through this, and Celia will come out the back end. You and I had 1,000 talks, 1,000 prayers.
Since I was 13, anorexia has been a part of my life, and I expect it always will be in some way. Through the years, I have learned how to quiet the voices, though at times their whispers can still be heard. Recovery is possible, and it is a blessing. To my family, I would not be here without you. My love forever, Celia.